Welcome to our July Buzz Pick of the Month author event. We're thrilled to have Taylor Jenkins Reid and Casey McQuinston here to talk about Taylor's latest book, Malibu Rising. But first, let's get to know them both a little bit better. Taylor Jenkins Reid is the New York Times bestselling author of 7 novels, including Daisy Jones and the Six and The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Her latest novel, Malibu Rising, was an instant bestseller and a Read with Jenna book club pick. Casey McQuinston is the New York Times bestselling author of Red, White, and Royal Blue. In addition to being a pie enthusiast, Casey loves to write books about smart people with bad manners falling in love. Malibu Rising is on sale now and available at your local independent bookstore. Visit indiebound.org to find an indie in your area. Throughout the conversation today, feel free to use the Q&A box to send in a question. We'll have a Q&A portion towards the end with some of the questions here and those submitted at your registration. Closed captioning is also available at the bottom of your screen. On behalf of Indie Book Buzz and Bookfinity, thank you so much for joining us today. And remember to follow Indie Book Buzz on Instagram and visit bookfinity.com for all the latest BuzzPick news. And now, we're pleased to virtually welcome Casey McQuinston and Taylor Jenkins Reid.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
It's so good to see you.
So good to see you. It feels like it's been a very long time.
I know. For everybody watching at home, the last time that Taylor and I were face to face was summer of 2019. What a time. And we were actually at the Ripped Bodice, one of my very, very, very favorite indie bookstores.
A very, very cool store.
Yeah. And I also have, I did go get off my shelf my signs copy, not to flex, but it is signed. And I also, to shout out another indie bookstore I love, picked it up at Books or Magic, where they had signed copies. But I would love to open us up by just talking about what we love about indie bookstores, because we are here with Indie Book Buzz. So what do indie bookstores mean to you as an author?
Yeah, I mean, how much time do you have? I feel like, you know, look, I have had my most recent books get some attention, but they're my recent books, and my first book came out in 2013. I didn't really start getting a bigger audience until my 5th book. Mm-hmm. So when I was starting out and there wasn't a lot of publicity for me and there wasn't a lot of promotion and stuff like that, it was booksellers. Mm-hmm. That's who was helping me find my audience. And so I would get emails from people that were like, I went to so-and-so bookstore and they recommended your book. And word of mouth is all I had. And that was how I was getting into people's hands. And so, look, any way that a person wants to get a book, I'm not going to shake a stick at. But when you go into an indie bookstore, there's a point of view there. There's a bookseller there who has an opinion, who reads, who likes to share what they love. And I really do think that is the most effective and meaningful way of getting our work into people's hands. And so both as a reader and a writer, I know that indie bookstores are where that moment of, I really think you'll love this book happens. And that's why we write books.
Completely. Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, like, as an author, you cannot state enough the support that indie booksellers gives you especially when you're just starting out, or you haven't like gotten that like big moment yet, that big like breakthrough moment. Indie booksellers are the ones who lay the foundation for that, and God bless them for it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Malibu Rising, which I absolutely adored. As I mentioned before we came on live, I read it on a beach vacation, which could not have possibly been a better location unless I had literally been in Malibu. But I mean, this is your 7th book, as you mentioned, and it is kind of the 3rd in this sort of Taylor Jenkins Reid cinematic universe, or I guess technically, is it a Riva cinematic universe?
As much as I hate to give him that much credit, it might be. Yeah.
I mean, okay, so let's talk about that. I mean, where did you kind of get the spark for this idea? No pun intended.
Yeah.
And you know, how did you choose this as the next destination for this sort of universe to go?
Well, there were two elements that were coming to me at once. And I don't know if you find this to be true with your work, but I feel like a lot of times there are multiple ideas that are percolating, and then you start to realize like, oh, they kind of fit together. And for me, I wanted to write about the children of someone famous. I really liked the idea of diving into that feeling that there are eyes on you, even though you didn't choose for that, and what pressure that would be. And also, I'm often writing about the difference between what something looks like on the outside versus what it feels like to live it. And so I thought, well, if you write about the children of let's say a famous man, and people are gonna be like, oh, well, they must have so much money, and they're like so glamorous, and everything's probably, we think we know what that life is. And I wanted to tell a very different story. And so I wanted to combine that with this feeling that I'd had for a number of years, where I wanted to tell a story about siblings that have to raise themselves. Like the Party of Five, Shameless, that feeling of, we're all in this together. We're in over our heads, but because of that, we're sort of bonded together in this way that is nothing can really tear us apart. And so I was thinking, and I thought, okay, so it's a group of siblings, and they're going to have to be abandoned by their parents. And so what famous man that I've created would abandon his kids?
Let's pick a dirt bag.
Yeah. Which of the dirt bags shall we? And immediately it was Riva. Immediately it was like, okay, here's my opportunity to dive into this character who had first shown up in The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and then shows up in Daisy Jones. It's like, here's the moment. We're going to get to know who he is, why he is the way he is. And what became really the heart of the story to me, and the most interesting and important part, was as we see in Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones, Riva is a guy who seems to have no problem doing whatever he wants and not thinking of where the chips fall.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot, it's not I think, I mean, I think it's fact, but there are a lot of men in the world that are like that are handsome and charming, and so they get away with a lot of stuff, but ultimately there's always somebody behind them picking up the pieces.
Yeah.
And it's often a woman. So who is the woman who's picking up the pieces for Riva? And that ultimately becomes the story of Malibu Rising, because the answer is his oldest daughter, Nina. And so Nina is the one Mick can go off and gallivant and do whatever he wants, because other people are filling the gaps of who, the gap between who he is and who his children need him to be. Nina is the one who steps up and does that. And so ultimately that's the story at the heart of Malibu Rising.
Yeah, it was super effective. I mean, as a youngest child, I did like want to call all the oldest children I knew and be like, thank you for being the backbone of our society. But yeah, speaking of the siblings, I feel like all four of them, they're so real. They're so fully formed, even though like you have the sense of their lives continuing off the page. Like even when they're not on page, I'm like, oh, what are they up to? What's Kid up to? So what was the process of developing those personalities? Did you kind of develop them as an ensemble, or was it each one individually? And did you pull any inspiration from like real life celebrities of the 80s or anything like that for them?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm hugely flattered that you feel like they exist off the page, because ultimately in any story, in any medium, that is the thing that I care about. Friends was a really funny show and I liked watching it, but more than anything, I liked the characters. I wanted to spend time with them. And I think that's always what I'm aiming for, is the feeling that you really know these people, even if you don't like them or agree with what they choose to do. With the siblings in particular, they really, and I think this is kind of true of siblings in general, they're all formed in relationship to each other. So ultimately the story's about Nina. So I know who Nina is. She is the person who is always going to pick up the pieces, who can withstand so much, who is in some ways made of steel, because she does not have a choice to be made of anything else. And when you put Nina, you sort of situate her, you realize, well, if the next youngest is Jay and he's barely that much younger than her, there's probably a feeling of like, well, I should be in charge.
Yeah.
It's like if Nina's going to take after her mother, then Jay's going to take after his father.
Yeah.
And then you have Hud, who comes just a tiny bit after, and there's no room for him to be like Jay. Jay is so Jay that he has to find a different way. And that way is to be kinder and gentler and to be more thoughtful about Nina and what she's going through. And then, the most fun is you have Kit, who wasn't around to see how bad her dad was, and lived with the security that her older siblings will take care of her. And that allows her to be more in touch with her anger and less impressed with her father. And so they all kind of, one informs the next, informs the next, informs the next, which I think is true of siblings in general. And, there's not anyone who's based on anyone famous, but I will say I did a lot of reading about like the Brat Pack and supermodels and whatever. And I did find it really kind of fun to think to read memoirs about by like Brooke Shields, Andre Agassi, Rob Lowe. I did some research into Amelia Estevez and Charlie Sheen and that sibling relationship. So, I mean, I can always convince myself it's research to read a celebrity memoir. So I did a lot of that.
I think that is what I think like a really important part of doing any project is kind of like developing a fluency. Like if it's supposed to be set in like a world that we're familiar with, like I feel like you bring such a fluency into those worlds, like where I feel like, even if it's not a specific celebrity that it's like, inspired by, I can project like 500 different people I know of. Like I was reading it and I was like, Nina really reminds me of Paula Barbieri. It's, and I love that.
Well, I think that's what's fun about writing in this world, is that we all have a common cultural experience, for more or less, like maybe we're more aware of different areas, but we all know crazy Hollywood in the 80s. We all have an understanding of that. And so I can create something that exists sort of adjacent to it, but feels like it's within it. And everyone can bring their memories or their the stuff about the 80s that was the most fun to them into it. And there's something there for everyone to grab onto, even though technically there aren't any real celebrities at the party. But I want it to feel like there are, even though technically, with the exception of like one person, they're all fake.
Yeah. I would love to hear more about your process of like, a whole book taking place over the course of 24 hours is wild. And then I love when you get into the party and there's all these different like threads that almost feel like their own little short stories, their own little vignettes. What was the process of developing all of those little tertiary characters who all come together to make the story of the party? And also, do you have any favorites?
Yeah. Oh man. Well, it was they were really, really fun to write. I will say that. And it's funny because there were certain ones that had been there since the first draft, and then there are others that didn't get added until much later, but ended up being some of my favorites. Tuesday Hendricks is one of the ones that that was like more of a last minute ad that I ended up being just really taken with. But my feeling was this, and it's not dissimilar to why I took the approach I did with Daisy Jones and the Six, but I really want my books to feel like an immersive experience. I don't just want to tell you a story, I want to bring you there. So it's not just that you're reading about this 70s rock band. I want you to feel like you're hearing it from the rock band. I want you to feel like you're at the show, you're behind the scenes. I don't just want to tell you about this cool 80s party. I want to put you right there in the corner watching all of it unfold. I want you to feel like it's happening all around you. And so I felt like we got to know what else is happening at this party. You know, you have to know who's in the kitchen and who's hooking up in the coat closet and who's, you know, and so I wanted to make it immersive. And it provided me this opportunity to make all these fake famous people up to no good, which was really fun. And so, like I was saying, somebody like Tuesday Hendricks, I figured out toward the end. Some of the other ones had been there from the very beginning. There was a like TV star who's like, he's not Tom Selleck in any way, but he's like on he's on like a Magnum PI like show, like
right.
He'd been there from the very beginning, and Vaughn Donovan. I mean, sometimes also just the names.
So many good names, Taylor. How do you do it?
Because you don't have to. It doesn't have to exist within reality. You can, like, that's what's so much fun about Hollywood in general, is like everyone can just make themselves up. Everyone can just be their own creation. And so if you're your own creation and your name is Robert Donovan, but your middle name is Vaughn after, you know, it's like, well, I'm going to be Vaughn Donovan, because you can recreate yourself. And so, or Bridger Miller, which is, I mean, just fundamentally absurd names. I love to make a fake name. I love it.
And you're so good at it. You're so good at it.
Thank you.
I mean, I also think you were so good at like building up like that suspense of like, I don't know, it was like I was getting so stressed out for like the last like probably 200 pages. I was like, oh my God, they're swinging from the chandelier. I'm so stressed out. Like, I was just like waiting for like the worst to happen. I mean, like, I don't know, something that I think one of the highest compliments I can think of to give someone is that like I'm a very slow reader, and I've never picked up one of your books and not finished it in the same like 24 hours span.
Thank you. I you know, I have to say, Casey, I feel similarly. I can tell you, like when I read your first one, I remember neglecting my duties as a mother and a wife. Like it was like a weekend, and I just said to my husband, I was like, you just need to handle everything. Like, I'm not putting this book down. And then I did the same thing. I think I read One Last Stop, like it was last month, and like I was supposed to be packing because I've been moving all around and like renovating a house, and I was just like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm just gonna read this book. So I think we have a mutual admiration society in that.
Thank you so much. That means the world. But do you, I don't know, I don't know how I would answer this question if I was asked it, but do you have like a secret sauce that you put in your books that makes me read them so fast? Like,
you know, I don't know what it is, but I will say, I take the job of entertaining very seriously. I don't think other people need to take me seriously, but I take my job doing that very seriously. And I think what I want for my books is, look, they're about a lot of things. I put the way that I feel about the world into them. I'm trying to say something. I'm trying to signal to people that I see them, that I understand them. I'm trying to support certain people. I'm trying to discomfort other people. I'm doing all that. But I really want to show people a good time. I really want, to me, when I've been the most stressed in my life or sad or whatever, what can break me out of it is being consumed by something that feels effortless to do.
Yeah.
And so I want to give that to people. I try to make sure that when you pick up one of my books, it's a joy and it feels effortless. And I will do that work so that you don't have to, is kind of my feeling, is let me write it and put all of the effort into writing it so that by the time it gets into your hands, it feels like a breeze. That is what I'm trying to do for readers.
I love, like, one of my friends when she was reading, when she started Malibu Rising, she's like, Taylor Jenkins Reid is the best author in the game at just like putting the most beautiful people in emotionally fraught situations and making sure that like there's also going to be some tasteful nudity. You know? And I was like, that's like, it was literally like I was packing for my trip and I was like, into the suitcase it goes, we're moving it up the to-do list. Which I don't know, but I think that's like, it's very human. It's also like your books have this like energy of like, I'm going to sit down with somebody who is going to just like tell me all of the secrets I've ever wanted to know about people I don't know.
That's all I want. I just want someone to tell me all the gossip. I just want to know what everyone's doing behind closed doors all the time. And so I feel like I'm just going to make up fake people, make it seem like nobody knows what's going on behind closed doors, and then like open up open up the door a tiny crack and be like, come on, you can come see what's happening. It's like, how they always say, like, write the book you wish you had it on the shelf. And it's like, I'm just trying to entertain myself. I'm just trying to tell stories about, beautiful people and tasteful nudity. I love that. I'm willing to write it down. Please thank your friend for me.
I will. I feel like is what I love to do too. I feel like that's why your books, like especially these three and like Red, White, and Royal Blue and like The Royal We by the Fug Girls, like all sit at the same table in the cafeteria, you know?
Yes.
And they're just telling just like stone cold gossip, you know? But yeah, so I would also love to talk about California. I mean, obviously you are, exploring all of these different like eras and places in California. What do you think it is about California that just like lends itself to so many different kinds of stories? And are there any others that you want to explore that you haven't yet?
Yes. Part of what I love about California as a theme, as a thing to write about, is that it is, I don't know that there's another state that has participated so actively in its own mythology. It is so mythic, and the idea of California is just true enough that it's not a lie, but it's not fully true. I was actually just thinking about this morning because I was watching a documentary about this California architect, and they were showing these ads that at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s, a lot of Los Angeles and California was, we were putting out these ads that were like, come to California for the fresh air to cure your, breathing woes. And I mean, we were just peddling so much stuff that was mostly not true, but like a little bit true. Like the air is better here, or was at the time. And I think that's what I love about it so much, because gosh, we give you the hard sell, and it seems so good when we talk about it. The sun shines all year, and sorry, there's construction happening in my house right now, which I wasn't aware of, so I apologize. And there are orange groves, and you'll be healthy here, and and everybody's happy. And I bought it hook, line, and sinker. When I was 10 years old, I was saying to my mom, like, what are we doing in Massachusetts? It snows here. We're all like cold and miserable. Do you know about California? And then I moved here, and I was like, oh, okay, your problems follow you everywhere. Got it.
Yeah.
Cool. Like, everywhere is the same. But that's what's so enduring about the myth of California. And so I will continue to write about it. I will continue to inflate and break down that myth at all times. How loud is the?
Oh no, it's fine. It's really, it's like as if it's as if you're like running a fan in the next room. It's like, no big deal.
All right.
You're fine.
Well, I apologize.
It's okay. I mean, this is life now.
Yeah, right. I mean, there's nothing I can do there.
My beach chairs are in the corner. This is life. It's on theme though, so it's okay.
Yes.
But yeah, no. So are there any other like
Yeah.
eras or moods of California that you still want to get your hands on.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely I feel like the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Daisy Jones and Six, and Malibu Rising, they're all, as you were saying, you know, if we can call them like a Riva series. I think of them as sort of women in the public eye.
Mm-hmm.
And each of them are taking on a different aspect of the myth of Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one more type of famous woman that I want to write about, and I want to dissect that relationship between that woman and her audience. And so I'm going to stay in this zone for one more book. And and then after that, I don't know what the future holds, which is a scary thing, because I feel like I've been really liking the area that I'm in for a long time, and it's going to be eventually time to put that to bed and go try something else. But for right now, I have one more thing I really want to say, one more space that I am just really, really excited about.
Yeah.
And
I assume we are not going to get to hear the details of it.
No. But I will say that it's like, it's pouring out of me that I want to tell everybody, but I know that the smart thing to do is to keep it to myself for a little while longer. But no, I'm very excited about it. And I'm at the part, and I know that you recognize this cycle as well. I'm at like the part where the happiness is like at full bloom, and I know eventually I'm going to be convinced that it's a terrible book right soon, but like right now I'm like, oh, it's so good, I'm so happy with it.
Yeah, no, there's definitely that is like the cartoon character running off the cliff and they haven't looked down yet, you know. It's like you're just walking on air, baby.
That's exactly what I'm doing. Cut to next month, sweat beating down my face as I realize it's terrible.
You know, you could never convince me that you have that part of your process, even though I know intellectually that you must, because you're a writer and this is what you do. Because your books, I'm just like, I'm just gliding down the Pacific Coast Highway in this book, like I'm having the time of my life. Speaking of the PCH, the Malibu itself is like such a character in this book, and not just because it's in the title. Did you feel like you got to know Malibu on a different level when you're writing this?
Yeah. What's really great about where I am in my career right now is that with each book, I'm taking on this immense research period where I get to fall in love with something. So I got to fall in love with 70s rock when I wrote Daisy Jones, and I got to fall in love with Malibu in the writing of this. I always loved it in that, you know, my husband and I have something to celebrate. Let's go out to dinner in Malibu. We're having a bad day. Let's go walk on the beach in Malibu. You know, it's a place that you can go that, I mean, I think in general, some people are just water people. So when you're standing at the water, you're happier. And I am just very much that.
Yeah.
But what was so much fun was having a good excuse to go and read the entire Wikipedia page for Malibu, California, and then read like 7 books on the history of it, and buy a star map and drive around Malibu and try to figure out where everybody lives, which is just a great time if anyone wants to kill a day and is in Los Angeles. It was just such a delight to get to do all of it. I love Malibu, California. That's why I said it there, but I felt even more in love with it over the course of writing this book. And I hope that shows in the pages, because I really do think it is a beautiful place in which I think the myth of Malibu holds up more than most of the myths of California.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I've been to Malibu. I like spent some time in Southern California in my 20s, and I don't know, like it hits. Like it's just like exactly what you want it to be.
I feel the same way. It is as beautiful as you think it will be when you get there. I think that's what's as special about it as it is. And I don't even like eat seafood or want to go into a cold ocean. So in theory, I should hate it, but I love it. I just love being there. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. And there's like, I mean, I think there's just like the romance of something living up to the hype, you
Yes,
know?
100%. It's
Yeah.
so rare that something does. And so when it does, I feel like I'm like, how much are you charging for that sandwich? $17? Okay. Okay, Malibu. I will do it.
Oh my God. Okay. So speaking of water, I've been like following your like surf Sundays on Twitter, on Instagram.
Yes.
And like, I mean, I can just tell from reading this, I didn't know what you were talking about when you were talking about surfing, but it sounded like you knew what you were talking about. So I mean,
Yeah.
how much did you learn about surfing, and how much did you actually put yourself through getting in the Pacific Ocean? Because it's so cold.
Yeah. It's all trickery. I do not know how to surf. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But it's funny when I said that I was going to do this book, I called up my manager, who is the guy that I'm talking to. His name's Brad. I talk to him almost every day. And he and I are the ones who are sort of thinking about, okay, what am I going to do next? And both in terms of my books and any other projects that I do. And I said, the thing I'm going to do next, Malibu 1983 surfers. And he's like, are you kidding? And I was like, no. And he was like, I surfed Malibu in 83. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, I'm a surfer. I've done that my whole life. I have worked with this man for 10 years. And I did not know that like on the weekends he surfed. We just like talk about our kids and work. And I just didn't know that like he was a surfer. Wow. I knew he grew up in Los Angeles on the West Side, but the rest of it I didn't know. So I was like, Brad, you have to help me. So I took him out to lunch. And I just I grilled him for like 2.5 hours. I was like, if you were here, how would you describe that? What would you say this is? If I'm doing this, what's that called? The notes that I took were just so intense, but it was the perfect place to start because it's like, that's when I learned what I didn't know and needed to go learn. And so I can talk like a surfer now. I barely know what I'm saying, but I do know the words to use. And right before I had finished the book, my husband and I went to Hawaii for a long weekend, and we're like sitting on the beach, and I see this sign, and it's like surf lessons, and I was like, okay, I have to go do this. It's the right thing to do.
Don't you hate when you have that realization?
It was like, man. So and luckily the water in Hawaii is very, very warm. Otherwise I wouldn't have done it. But it was a joke. Me on that surfboard was the saddest thing. Like when even when you're in it, you're like, this looks bad. Like from the outside, I can tell this is not good. But after that, 45-minute lesson, I went right back into my hotel. I picked up my phone and I wrote a full paragraph of what it feels like when you're surfing, because there were certain things that you just don't know until you do. And so it's like that, the feeling of the surfboard against your chest and the way that the water gets into your eyes. And I looked at that paragraph and I was like, this is why, even though I didn't want to do it, I had to do it. And I hope that shows in the book. Otherwise it's a waste of my time, but I think it shows.
No, I think it totally does. I mean, I think that is like, I am a big proponent of, I call this like method writing, like method acting, but it's like, I think that like, if you're going to write about like a really, like, especially if it's an experience that your protagonist or your POV character is like living for, like it is like their thing, like you have to do their thing at least once, and sometimes it's a thing that you really don't want to do.
I was lucky with Daisy Jones because I fell in love with 70s rock, and so listening to it all and that was great. Surfing, I wish I was just a different person, but I'm just a very clumsy person. I have no physical ability whatsoever. My husband always jokes that like 30 seconds after I leave the room, he's going to hear me go, ow, now because it's inevitable that so surfing is not for me, but it was very, very fun to be able to finally have those little details that you wouldn't get another way.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously from what you're saying, there was a tremendous amount of research that went into this book. And I find when I do a tremendous amount of research, which I also like to do, there's always like a few random things that I learned that I can't fit into the book, but I just think they're so fun and I will always remember them. Are there anything like that? Was there anything like that you came across when you were researching for this book?
Well, part of the thing about all the research is that you do all this research and then you want to put in everything that you found,
Yeah.
and then you realize if you've done your job well, you're going to learn 100 things and put in the best 7, and you have to learn the 100 in order to know what the best 7 are, is sort of how I feel. I will say that some of the most fun stuff was actually looking up the architecture in Malibu, the architecture of beach houses and the way that Malibu changed over the years and what celebrities choose to live where and why that is. And so one of the things I found really fascinating was, so Malibu, as we know it, that area of the coast was in the early 1900s owned by one family, the Frederick and May Ringe. And at some point, the government wanted to put PCH through it, and they didn't want anything going through their land. And at that point, unless you had a road going through it, Malibu is surrounded on all sides by cliffs and then the water. So you can't get to Malibu unless you're going to go over a mountain. And it wasn't like we had paved through the mountains yet or anything. So May Ringe, so Frederick dies. May Ringe is like, absolutely not. No one can have any of this land. I'm not doing it. She's fighting the government. It's costing her so much money to fight the government. She's suing everybody. She now gets herself into a position where she needs money.
Yeah.
So she takes this one particular area of the beach and she says, I'll rent out these parcels. So, okay, you can rent out this little bit of beach and build your own house on it if that's what you want to, on a piece that you rent. But it's very expensive. It's not going to be your main home. So it's going to be, a second home for somebody. So who in the area has enough money to spend on a second home where they don't even own the land underneath it? Movie stars. And so that's how you get all these movie stars in Malibu. Joan Crawford and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. They're renting these plots of land from May Ringe, and then they're building their own tiny little house on it. And that's their summer home, their second home, where they go on the weekends when they're not shooting. And so that's the beginning of that relationship between Hollywood and Malibu in particular. And that area is now called, was for a while, but the Malibu Movie Colony. And it's a gated community. I can't get in there. I want to see the homes, but I don't know anyone that lives there.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of celebrities even now that own homes in that area. It was originally Joan Crawford and her generation renting these parcels.
That's fascinating. I had no idea. See, now
I wish I could have put it in the book. But
I know. But see, like, I do think you're right. Like, if you do your job well, like, the reader will be like, this person knows too much about this topic to even tell me everything I want to know.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and
you don't want the reader to have that feeling of like, oh wow, you did a lot of research and you want to make sure I know it.
Right.
You want it to feel effortless. Yeah.
Oh my God. I've definitely read like older books like that where I'm like, man, this person like really wants me to know that they know everything there is to know about Victorian hairstyles. And I'm like, I don't personally need to know that.
I don't need to know that. Yeah.
Okay. So we have 20 minutes to go. I'm going to ask you one more question before we jump to audience Q&A, just because this is my selfish question that I'm curious about. So when I picked up this book, I was so curious to see how you were going to handle the Evelyn situation. Because I was like, I am of two minds of it. Because like as an author, I would be tempted to either go the full indulgence route and give her a scene, or I would be tempted to do the full like, haha, gotcha, and she's just not even mentioned.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so, and I love the way that she's included very tastefully.
Yeah.
So I'm curious like how you decided how much or how little to put in of Evelyn, since this is not technically her story. We don't want her to eclipse anyone.
Yeah. I will say Evelyn for me eclipses everyone.
Yeah.
I you know, yeah, it's not her story. And the thing, basically, here's where I landed on it. I think what's really cool is that there's a period of time where Evelyn Hugo is Nina Riva's stepmother. And that like blows my mind. And so to me it was like, let's include this, and let's like, I want to put in stark relief June and Evelyn. These are women of the same generation. Their lives have gone in very different ways. They're made of very different things.
That's so fascinating. I love it so much.
And so I wanted to give June that moment in which she's looking at that magazine and seeing Evelyn, and readers will just know if that magazine cover interests you, there's a whole other world you can, you know, open up. But yeah, I think about the fact that Evelyn Hugo is for a moment Nina Riva's stepmother. I think about it way more than I need to, but it's like a fact I find fascinating.
In my little like fantasy brain, I like to imagine like a one day, like 10 years after the events of the book, where like somehow at some like I don't know, maybe like Rick, oh my god, who's Rick? Mick needs to be like bailed out of a situation, and somehow I just love to imagine Evelyn and Kit being in the same room, and like there being this moment of like two ships passing where you like, you know, they could have meant so much to each other and like taught each other so much if they had ever had the opportunity to have that relationship.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a number of elements of it that are really fascinating, and I don't want to give any too much away, but there's a conversation that Mick has with his kids toward the end of the book, where they're asking questions about the way he's conducted his life. And the reader, if you've read Evelyn Hugo, has information that Mick doesn't have, and about the results of his relationship with Evelyn Hugo. Yeah. And there's layers to it that if you read Malibu first and then go read Evelyn, I think you get something different. And if you read Evelyn first and then you read this, you get something different. Regardless, Evelyn Hugo and Mick Riva are two very self-driven, self-involved people. And I think Evelyn is what happens when you have a heart under all that, and Mick is what happens when you really just push your heart down as much as possible. And I can't help but truly love them both. Yeah. Even though Evelyn ultimately I also like, and Mick I can't stand.
Yeah. It was such like an emotional trip for me to like. I was like, you know where he's going, but I still at the beginning was like, oh, it's baby Mick, and like I'm rooting for him, and like he seems like a nice guy. He seems like he means what he's saying. I think he does, but
yeah. Well, I mean, look, the person who can con Mick Riva more than anybody is Mick Riva. You know, he convinces himself of a lot of things, and then he lets himself down as much as anybody else.
I think we all know that guy in real life.
Yeah. They're everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, so I have these are Q&As from readers that were submitted ahead of time, so I'm just going to read names, and I'm choosing at random, so if I don't get to yours, I'm so sorry. Okay. So Alyssa would like to know, she says, they say that Nina becomes her own hero. Who is your hero?
I mean, I'm so tempted to say what Matthew McConaughey once said, which is that he's his own hero.
Yeah.
10 years in the future, but no, I have a very, very concrete hero, and that is Lucille Ball. I loved her when I was a kid, and I think in a lot of ways my understanding of what women are capable of was shaped by her. I think I saw her on TV, and she was the star of that show, and she was so funny, and she was so comfortable being the butt of the joke, but also fundamentally the show respected her talent. Her husband respected her talent in real life, even though obviously their relationship was not great. She was 40 when I Love Lucy premiered.
Wow, really?
Yeah, she was 40, and she had been working in Hollywood for 20 years, and just she had done well for herself, but she never got to the place she wanted to get. They called her the Queen of the B movies. That's kind of where she was. But so much of my understanding of being a woman in Hollywood and not accepting no for an answer, and I admire her so much. I mean, she was the first woman to ever run a studio.
Yeah. Incredible.
Just a lot of firsts, and a lot of people telling her she couldn't do it, and then she did it anyway. So Lucy is, I think, forever my hero.
Great answer. Although I would have also accepted Matthew McConaughey as an answer. Okay. So let's see. Missy wants to know if this is actually a controversial question. Missy wants to know if you read reviews for your own books, which I know a lot of authors have differing opinions on.
Yes. So I really try not to. I really try not to. I fail, but I try not to. And basically my feeling on it is this. There's almost nothing good that can come from it, because if there's a general consensus that there's a problem with the book, then that's something that I should know, and I should, contend with that. But everybody's different. Everyone has their own opinions. If I go through and read all the bad reviews, are they right or are they not right? They're subjective.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I think, well, maybe I shouldn't listen to them. But then I'm not going to only listen to the good reviews. So now I'm not listening to the bad ones or the good ones. Yeah. So now all I'm doing is listening to the ones that think the book was good, not great. In which case, I agree. That's
as long as it has one, right? As long as it has one quibble, then it's like, this one I could trust.
Right. And it's like, so ultimately, I just always end up in the same place, which is there are things to like about this book, and there are things that I should try harder on next time, which is where I pretty much always stay. So I just took a really painful route to end up in the same place that I was when I began. So I really, really try not to. I really don't care for being tagged in reviews of my work that are unkind. I don't need to know if you didn't like my book. The same way you don't need to know if I don't like your sweater. It's like but the reviews are there for readers, not for writers, and so I try to keep it that way.
Yeah.
You read yours?
I don't ever.
Good.
But I will say, like, every now and then, and this is something I would recommend to most authors, every now and then, if I'm like feeling really like stuck or discouraged as a writer, like as like an artist, I will have a friend or loved one go to like my like Amazon or Goodreads page and cherry pick like 2 to 3 5-star reviews just for me to read.
Just to give you a little lift.
Right. I was like, I just need to hear someone say one nice thing about my talent for like 1 second so I can believe it's still there.
Yep. I get it. That's a good policy.
Yeah. But okay, so Pat has a question about your covers of your books.
Mhm.
I mean, I agree that your covers are iconic. So, but I also know as an author that I'm actually not sure how much control you have over them.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about the process, especially of this cover, of how it
Yeah.
was selected and how it was designed?
You know, it's funny. I don't know if you've had this experience, but I feel like a lot of times the the moment where they show you the cover is very uh high anxiety.
Mhm.
But with Evelyn Hugo, it just showed up that way. It was just first round great. It was the first time I'd ever had that experience where I was like, oh my gosh, you guys nailed it on the first round. Like, let's do this a little bit here and change this, but like, this is great. With Daisy Jones, it took us a long time. There were a lot of different ideas, and then we finally narrowed it down to that. With Malibu, what was funny was they sent about like 6 ideas. And I was like, I love all 6. Like, it was like the first time where I was like, I love them all.
Yeah.
And then it was decided we weren't going to use any of them because I don't know, there was some department that basically was like, none of these quite work for us. So it was like, okay, fine, back to the drawing board. And the whole time I was like, we had 6 great ones. Like, how do we have to go back to the drawing board? And then it was like, boom, how about this one? I was like,
Yeah.
you guys are just on fire lately. Like, they just did a beautiful job. And what I love about it is that it's just beautiful. Like, you just, like, I would hang it if it didn't have my name on it. I would
Yeah.
hang it in my office. It's just beautiful. And so Penguin Random House just really outdid themselves with this one. Yeah.
Truly. Do you have that moment of
Yours, what I like is that you have an aesthetic that's working for you.
Yeah, no, I love my aesthetic. I am there's so many pink tones
Yeah.
happening on my covers.
Yes.
Although, do you have that moment? I always have that like moment of suspense when like I'm getting the first concepts and I don't know what color palette they're gonna pick.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I feel like that's such it's like going into like a new like color era of my life because I know that like
Yes.
everything is gonna be purple from here on out for a
Mhm.
while.
Yes.
You know,
It's like we're Madonna and reinventing ourselves with every episode. So it's like, what is our
I'm
look
in my
for the
purple
next?
era.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what's funny, so I on my computer, I have this one file, and in that file is another file and another file, and then eventually it just says books, and it's just 7 files, 7 folders, and I color code them all with the color that feels the most right to me for that book at the beginning. And so by the time we're getting to the cover parts, I've already made this book a color in my head.
Oh, wow.
And then it's like, oh, okay, you see it as that color. Interesting. But I will say, obviously Malibu was blue, and obviously the cover is blue. So
Yeah.
we love that one.
I mean, I think you kind of stack the deck in blue's favor. There's so much water. But I did the same thing because like for my next one, I sent the designer a bunch of mood boards and I very deliberately put a lot of the color I wanted in the mood boards.
Yes.
And I got my color I wanted.
There we go.
So, you know,
you're accepting them.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to try my best to pronounce this person's name, but I might get it wrong. I believe it is pronounced Layla, but it could be Lysla. Do you think the relationship between Mick and June is what would have happened to Billy and Camila's if they hadn't worked out their relationship?
I think that's a really interesting question. And I will say that from the beginning, I think that from the beginning, I saw Mick and June as who Camila and Billy could have been if Billy was incapable of change. Because I think Billy and Mick are not dissimilar in their origin story, but it's about when you get to a certain limit, are you capable of doing better or not? And Billy is and Mick isn't. But here's where I think the analogy ends up not working is that Camila will put up with less than June.
Yeah.
And they're both really complicated women, and I feel for both of them. And Camila is a bit flintier, and June is a bit more of a dreamer. And I think there are similarities, but then there is that moment where the similarities end, and maybe that's the difference between you know, a more hopeful future or not.
Yeah. I feel like I related a lot to June because like she has that like romantic streak where she's like, I think at the end of the day still holding out hope that like that happy ever after is just being delayed, and that like, you know, if I just wait and I'm like patient and good and kind and strong, that it will come back to me. And it's just like, oh, it's so brutal to watch happen to her.
Well, and it's what story are you telling yourself that you're living in? Right?
Yeah.
Because if it's a story of a woman who finally realizes she doesn't need a man, then that's a different life that June's gonna live for herself. But if she sees herself as living in a story in which at the end all of the trials and tribulations are all worth it because it's ended in this way that she wants, you know, she's living in a different story. And I think June's living in a story where and I've certainly done it in my past, especially as a teenager, where you tell yourself, you know, as Shakespeare said, the course of true love never did run smooth, you know, and you tell yourself that, and it's all going to be worth it in the end, but we don't know what the end is. And so for June and Camila, those are two different takes on a similar situation.
Yeah. Oof. The themes. Okay, so I think we have time for like one or two more, so I'm going to try and make them quick. Do you have Gatika asked what advice do you have for aspiring writers?
My advice is to write even though it's bad, write even if you're scared, write even if you don't think that you have anything good to write about just yet. I think what makes somebody a writer is whether you've finished something, not whether it's good. And so just finish it and then go from there. You can always edit something that's bad, but I think you're a writer once you finish something.
Yeah. I always say the point of a first draft is not to be good, it's just to be complete.
Yes.
Like that's all it has to be.
That's exactly.
It can be hot garbage, but if it has a beginning, a middle, and the end, it's like you're doing okay.
Then you finished it and it's done. And you know, the thing that I always say is like, my first drafts are hot garbage. They are garbage. It doesn't make you a bad writer just because you wrote something that's bad. A bad writer is somebody who leaves it bad.
Yeah.
But you know, you can always edit that. So my advice is just to write.
For sure. Okay, last one. I think we have time to squeeze this one in. Okay, so Christina wants to know what some of your current and recent favorite reads are.
Oh man. Well, I truly did just absolutely adore One Last Stop. I really thought it was fantastic. And I wasn't the least bit surprised. You delivered on all the things that I wanted from it. And it was just cute as hell. So
thank you.
Romance, just James is the cutest, just the whole thing. I just loved it.
Thank you so much.
I also really loved, and I don't know if you've read this one yet, but The View Was Exhausting by Michaela Clements and
I haven't read that one yet.
It's really fun. It's a good romance. It's about an A-list actress, and she's like weathered some scandal, and so her publicist is like, we gotta create a situation that will get people excited about you again. Let's make it look like your on again, off again boyfriend has come back. People love you guys, whatever. And so it's like over the course of that, however many months, somebody catches feelings for somebody else. It's fake, but is becoming real. I mean, it's literally, I don't know what they did to get J-Lo and Ben Affleck.
I was about to say, I was like, they manifested Ben Affleck.
That publicity for them is so, I mean, it's just exquisite. Also, just whatever the novel is that we're all watching as J-Lo and Ben Affleck just gallivant around town, feeding us The most delicious moments.
Oh my God.
A gift.
Literally her Instagram post over the weekend.
She's so good. She knows exactly what she's doing.
Brilliant.
She's so good.
Brilliant.
Also, how does she look that beautiful? Like
52.
What the hell? I love it. I'm living for it. It is so delicious. And every morning you get to wake up to some new photo op that they have just handed us.
Literally, she's a genius. Her mind.
She's a genius. Yeah, so those were yours and The View was exhausting were my romances for the summer that I've really been.
Oh, thank you. That great picks.
Yeah. I have good taste, right?
Yeah. All right. I think that we are just about at time. I am so thankful to everybody for coming, and Taylor what a joy to get to chat with you.
I agree. The gratitude is all from me. Thank you for doing this and taking the time. It's always so fun to talk to you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about Malibu.
Yeah, of course. I'm not sure if there's any more like housekeeping that we need to do for Indie.
I don't think so. I think we just say goodbye.
I think we're just chilling. We're just signing off. Okay. Everybody, please, if you haven't already, please read Malibu Rising. You will not be disappointed. I had a fantastic time. And then go back and read the entire Taylor Jenkins Reid backlist if you have not already. But thank y'all so much. And thank you again, Taylor.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.